Morgan. And his evaluator is Laura McDonald. Laura, can you give us Taylor's objectives, please?
Taylor is speaking out as a confident communicator. He's doing Project 4. I hope to evaluate him with clarity and impunity. His objectives are to select the right words and sentence structure to communicate his ideas clearly, accurately, and vividly, to use rhetorical devices to enhance and emphasize ideas, and eliminate jargon and unnecessary words while using correct grammar. His time frame is 5 to 7 minutes.
She calls out to the man on the street. Sir, can you help me? It's cold and I've nowhere to sleep. He walks on, doesn't look back. He pretends he can't hear her. Starts to whistle as he crosses the street. Seems embarrassed to be there. Taylor Morgan, Another Day in Paradise. Another Day in Paradise, Taylor Morgan.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and guests. When you hear the word homeless, what's the first image that comes to your minds? Perhaps it was the lady from the introduction. Perhaps it's the image of the man with the graying beards in the dark alley, covering himself in a cardboard box. What's the first image that comes to your mind? By show of hands, how many people thought of a child as their first image? One person in the entire group. Now imagine for a second what your life might be like if you were homeless. Where are you going to sleep tonight? Where's your next meal going to come from? How are you going to protect yourself? Now these questions are hard enough for us as adults to answer. Imagine yourself being 13 years old and having to answer the same questions. Homelessness, easy word to say, homelessness in America is a silent epidemic. But one thing that we tend to forget about is a big part of that problem are the homeless youth in America. And according to the United States Department of Justice, there are over 1.6 million youth living on the streets in America. Take a look through our own city. Where are the areas in town where you might expect to see the homeless youth? Do you see them? And I think the answer to that question, it depends a lot of times on the time of year. If you walk through the downtown area during the summertime, a lot of times you'll see them. A lot of times the youth will refer to themselves as travelers. If you talk to them, they come from Portland, they come from Sacramento, they come to Reno during the summertime. Why? Because it's warm here. But if you come back during the wintertime, it's a whole different scene. That doesn't mean that the problem has gone away. It's just a different perspective right now, because in this town especially, the summers are very warm, the winters are very cold. So we don't see the problem during the wintertime, but it's still there. And the youth are doing what we call couch surfing. They'll go from home to home, friend to friend. Sometimes it's day by day, night by night, not knowing where they're going to be. Now, the obvious question that comes to mind is, how does this happen? How do we as a society allow this to happen? 1.6 million youth in this country. There's a lot of different causes for homelessness amongst youth. The number one reason is disruptive family conditions. Youth who are being physically abused, youth who are being sexually abused, leave their homes. One study indicated that 46% of all youth living on the street have been physically abused at some point in their life. 17% of those youth had also been sexually abused by a family member or someone else living in the home, such as a step-parent or some other household member. One of the other reasons for homelessness amongst youth, financial crisis amongst the families. in this day and age, we all know what current economic conditions are like, and this is becoming a more prevalent problem amongst families that are simply able to not pay their bills, they can't pay their rent, they're kicked out of their homes. So sometimes it's the youth leaving with the families. And during that process as well, the youth sometimes can become separated from their families through transitional housing, through the different shelters. Another reason is residential instability. Sometimes these youth do get placed in foster care. They are taken by social services. They're placed in different foster care, but a lot of times these youth will transition from one foster care to another, and these are the youth that are also at high risk for becoming homeless. One of the additional problems that won't show up in the statistics for this as well too is that when these youth turn 18, they're no longer considered youth in the eyes of the law. Now 18 years old, being told, okay, you're on your own now, without having the skills, without having the education, without having the survivor skills that we've all been taught, and being forced to go out onto their own, a lot of these youth, even though they're technically not considered youth anymore, become homeless as well. Now, what are the consequences for this? Well, a lot of these youth, they face a lot of different challenges on the streets, as you can imagine. Very few of them actually get housed in shelters because the shelters don't exist in some cases, or there's not enough room, there's not enough beds for them all. A lot of times the youth are actually resistant to the help as well too. They don't trust adults, or they think that they're doing just fine on their own. But in order to survive, a lot of these youth are forced to make their way into prostitution. They trade sex for food, for shelter, for clothing, just to survive day to day. They're not thinking about tomorrow, they're not thinking about next week, they're thinking, what am I going to do tonight? Which obviously puts them at risk for HIV, a lot of other dangerous things out there for them. Homeless youth often suffer from issues such as depression, anxiety, poor nutrition. They have self-esteem issues. They have challenges in getting an education because they don't have the documentation that they need to even get into school. But there is hope. The title of the speech and the introduction, thank you, Josh, for reading it very well. I should have had my actor read that one too. It comes from a Phil Collins song, and it's a ironic title, but it's to remind us that there are millions of youth out there that do live on the streets, and most of us in this room, if not all of us, will never know what that experience is like. And we may never find a solution to this problem, but by learning and through a little bit of compassion, every one of us can make a difference in the life of a youth that does need help. Because